like to do some tapping with you today that's a little bit different. Sometimes I use tapping when I'm trying to read something or understand something that's challenging for me. Because usually what happens when I'm reading these things is there's some sort of self-doubt or question that comes up, or there's some sort of resistance to whatever it is that I'm reading. This has been particularly true as I've tried to work my way through the Tao Te Ching. And so I thought I would share with you a little bit of tapping. So I'm using this particular version or translation of the Tao Te Ching. There are so many, and each one has a little bit different interpretation. But this is verse 1 from the Tao Te Ching. A way that can be walked is not the way. A name that can be named is not the name. Tao is both named and nameless. As nameless, it is the origin of all things. As named, it is the mother of all things. A mind free of thought merged within itself beholds the essence of Tao. A mind filled with thought, identified with its own perceptions, beholds the mere forms of this world. Tao and this world seem different, but in truth they are one and the same. The only difference is in what we call them. How deep and mysterious this unity is. How profound, how great. It is the truth beyond the truth, the hidden within the hidden. It is the path to all wonder, the gate to the essence of everything. Now that's beautiful just on its own, but there is so much there to understand. And as soon as I started reading it and trying to understand, what came up for me was this thought, I'm not smart enough to understand this. Seemed like a good place to begin tapping. So remember, take responsibility for your own health and well-being, and that by tapping along, you're agreeing to the terms that are found at www.drleannamanuel.com/disclaimer. The intensity on the I'm not smart enough to understand this was probably about a 10 initially, and then my brain kicked in and said, no, really, you know better. But it came down to about a 7 before I started tapping, at least in my head. I suspect that in my body it's probably higher, but we're going to go with the 7. So I'm going to start on my karate chop point and say, even though I'm not smart enough to really get this, to understand it, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though it really stinks to feel like I'm not capable of understanding something like that, I choose to believe that I'm okay. Even though I feel like I'm not smart enough to get it, I love and accept myself anyway. I'm not smart enough to understand this. I'm not smart enough to understand this. I don't believe I'm smart enough to understand this. I don't believe that I'm smart enough to understand this. I'm not smart enough to understand this. I'm not smart enough to understand it. I'm not smart enough to understand this. I don't believe I'm smart enough to understand this. Taking a deep breath and letting it out. I'm down to about a 5, but that's still way too high. I like to make these things gone, so I have to sort of figure out what's going on and why it's not coming down faster, and if there are some other pieces to this. So I'm going to go back to my karate chop point. Even though I'm still having some of this feeling that I'm not going to get it, I choose to be open to clarity about what that's about. Even though I don't really believe I'm smart, not just about this, but I don't believe I'm smart, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I'm worried that I'm not very smart and that I'll never be able to understand this, I love and accept myself anyway. I don't believe I'm smart. I sure don't believe I'm as smart as other people think I am. And I have a belief that understanding the Tao Te Ching is something that only really smart people can do. And I'm not one of them. I'm worried that I'll never be able to understand it. And that if I try to share my understanding, other people will tell me I'm wrong or laugh at me or point out things that I obviously missed. I'm afraid I'm not smart enough to understand this passage. And that if I'm not smart enough, or if I try, there will be negative consequences. So statements like, I'm not smart enough, are things that come up to try to protect me from humiliation, embarrassment, and regret. That's the real problem here. It's not feeling like I'm not smart enough. It's feeling afraid of other people's reactions and how those might affect me. Saying I'm not smart enough doesn't feel quite so true anymore. Saying I'm nervous about the reactions of others is very true. And I have a lifetime of experiences to back that up. I've been laughed at before. I've been made fun of. I've been misunderstood. And I've always assumed that they were right and I was wrong. I choose to see that they were expressing their truth. But that doesn't make my truth wrong either. I choose to trust in myself and let the text speak to me. I'll get out of it what I need to get out of it. They will get out of it what they need to get out of it. And it doesn't have to be the same. I let go of my fear. I release my concerns about not being smart enough. I choose to move forward with an open heart. I choose to read more with an open spirit. Taking a deep breath and letting it out. All right. When I first read that verse, one of the things that popped out at me was that line that said, the only difference is what we call them. And I was thinking about how true that is in so many aspects of our life. Things are whatever they are. The label we put on them, what we call them, is part of what gives it meaning to us. The accuracy of that label is immensely important. So looking at what we call things and why we call them what we call them, how we label them, is a place where tapping can really help. The things that I was talking about as I did the earlier tapping, what other people were reacting to when I would share my insights or thoughts on things, if I call that them making fun of me, I'm going to have a reaction to that on the inside that's going to have an impact on me with everything that I do. If I call that them being childish or immature, it doesn't have to have the same impact on me. If I call it them expressing their truth and me expressing my truth, then it can actually be celebrated as something wonderful and unique and fascinating. And instead of tearing my energy system down, it can actually lift me up. That insight was gained after doing some initial tapping. Without the tapping, I was still stuck with, I'm not smart enough to understand this, and the rest just became pretty words. I hope this has been useful for you. We'll do some more tapping from the Tao Te Ching, and until next time, happy tapping!